Okay, there we go. And Damon, these are just some opening prayers. It's called a mandala offering and then refuge bodhicitta that we do in Tibetan. Sashi Buki Joshin Meta Tam Riraling Shin De Gemba Dia Sange Shindu Mita Uwagi Adogo Nanda Shinga Chuba Sho Idan Guru Ratna Mandala Kamne Yatayami Sange Chudon Sogi Jonam La Janju Baru Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Shushi Gibe Sunangi Dola Beju Sange Dubasho Sangye Chudon Sogi Jonam La Janju Baru Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Shushi Gibe Sunangi Dola Beju Sange Dubasho Sangye Chudon Sogi Jonam La Janju Baru Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Shushi Gibe Sunangi Dola Beju Sange Dubasho. So I think where we left off, we had gone through the first section, and I'll just do a quick review for those of you who didn't hear all of it. I won't spend a long time, but it starts out with the first thing is practice the preliminaries, which are basically what Rinpoche was going over today. Again, if any of you didn't hear it, I'll just do a quick synopsis of it. When you want to become a meditator and you're really serious and you've kind of heard a lot of teachings and you want to develop one point of concentration, then it's time to go into the woods. Sharon and I were just reflecting that our house backs up to the woods. So we've got like the perfect retreat house. But where he was going today is you've got to first get rid of your attachments to your body and your friends and your loved ones. Otherwise, you're going to be out there in the woods and you're going to be wishing you were back home. Um, and he went through Shanti Deva is he has a really good sense of humor. And so he starts going through why are we so attached to this body? And he starts the charnel ground contemplations of if you were looking at your own body, it would be no different than a body in a cemetery. And you'd watch it go from bloated and blue to repulsive. And I think Shanti Davis says it gets so repulsive, not even the wolves will go after it. The jackals will leave it alone, right? But that's our bodies that we're cherishing right now. And they're not so lovely once we start to decompose. So the whole purpose there is to try to get you into those preliminary points. One is right now we have a perfect human rebirth, and we've been born at the right time and place, and we can actually make some spiritual progress. Another is that it won't last long, it's impermanent. And when we die, we've got to follow our karma and wherever our karma takes us. And so it's really important to find some source of refuge. And that's really what Buddha was offering is what he called deathlessness, a state beyond birth and death, where you can find a permanent form of peace, which is called nirvana or cessation. And so that's like the preliminaries. You got to kind of understand that. And you got to understand how the cycle of birth and death keeps us swirling in samsara, or you'll keep churning. You'll keep on chasing the dream. Okay, so that brings us to the second point, which is actually how to train the mind. Now, I think the copy, Damon, that I sent you put the ultimate bodhicitta first. In the second category, it talks about how to actually meditate on the empty nature of the mind. And in the copy that you have that has both Tibetan and the pronunciation guide,
Okay.
um, it does not, that does not come first. What comes first is called relative bodhicitta. And so that's done for a reason that it's thought. In fact, I'll start this section on ultimate bodhicitta so you can understand why Pabanka, when he composed his version of the text, he put the ultimate bodhicitta second. Because if you even look at what Geshe Chikawa said here in the Tibetan, this is probably, I don't know what page of the hard copy it is. Let me see.
Can I use your Wi-Fi?
Um, I don't know off the top of my head
What the password is? Okay.
what the password
That's
is.
fine.
Um,
I'm getting some reception.
but this would be on page 2 of the Tibetan copy that I gave you.
Okay.
If you So if you just turn to page 2, the back side of that, then it'd be the second line down. Okay. So the Tibetan says, Dempe Tob. Dempa means steadiness or firmness. Tob means having attained firmness. And what he's talking about is talking about all the relative bodhicitta points, the preliminaries for the practice, and then developing a sense of exchanging self for others. Having attained firmness in all those relative bodhicitta points, ne means then, sangwa means secret, den means teachings. So after you've obtained firmness in all the relative bodhicitta points, then you can start pursuing the secret. So what's the secret, you may ask? At a relative level or at a Sutrayana level, that secret are the teachings on emptiness. At Vajrayana level, they're all the teachings about Vajrayana and the Tantrayana and special methods for achieving that wisdom of emptiness. So without getting firmness with the relative bodhicitta, it's really inappropriate to go into the secret teachings. You're not ready because the whole purpose of the secret teachings is to actualize the path of the bodhisattva. So I'll just review it a little bit. I know we went through it last time, but I mentioned that there are two main traditions for developing relative bodhicitta. One's called the seven cause and effect practice that came from Buddha to Maitreya, and then eventually down through Tsongkhapa. And the other's called the method of exchanging self for others, which has 5 points that we went through last time that are covered in the first part of the second section on relative bodhicitta. And so Kappa got both of those traditions for developing bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the wish to become enlightened, to liberate all beings from suffering. And he put them together into 11 points. So I'll just go through those 11 points briefly, and then I'll talk about a method for putting together into a contemplation that I went through briefly last time, which is on page 1. It's the bottom line on page 1. So you flip the page. It's the very bottom line. It says Dan Yi, which means those two, Lung La, onto your breath. Kimberja means mount those two. That's giving and taking practice. Mount those on your breath. And then it says Yul Sum, 3 objects. Duk Sum, 3 poisons. Getza Sum, 3 roots of virtue. And so this is a very powerful practice for developing bodhicitta. So I'll get to it, but first I'll give you a rundown of the 11 points. Um, the 11 points for developing your bodhicitta, combining the two rivers of instruction that I mentioned before. I know this is a lot to cover, so if you have questions, ask them. But it starts out with Tong Yom. Tong Yom is the sense of an equal friendliness towards all beings. Instead of holding some people close and others at a distance, um, cherishing a few people or a few animals and then not caring about the rest. The first task, if you want to develop bodhicitta, is to have an equal field towards all beings. And again, the Buddhist view is that we've been being born, dying, and accompanying all beings for countless lifetimes. So there's nobody you bump into that you haven't bumped into before and had a variety of relationships with. And in the ultimate wash, um, it's seen as kind of absurd to just hold a few people close and then not care about everybody else. So, so anyway, that's your first task if you want to develop bodhicitta, is trying to get kind of an equality, an equal feeling towards all beings. Once you've established that, then the next task is called marche, which means recognizing that all beings have been your mother. And this is, first you have to believe in rebirth, right? If you don't believe in rebirth, then you're not going to be able to get this point of the teachings, which is why my suggestion is to look into the science. Western science likes to, the bias in Western science is scientific materialism, which holds that the mind is a byproduct of the neural functioning. And therefore, when your brain dies, so does your mind. But there are exceptions to that in some of the more esoteric forms of research, like research on near death cases or children who remember previous lives or out of body experience research. And there are some very compelling bodies of research that indicate that the mind is not necessarily the nervous system, that it has the ability to function outside of the nervous system. So those kinds of studies, if you're raised in the Western way, the West gives you two choices. Either the mind's the brain and it dies when you die, or God created your mind, and when you die, God will decide whether you go up or down. Right? Those are your two choices, door A or door B. Buddhists kind of look at that and they go, I don't think either door is actually correct. Um, the Buddhist point of view is that the mind is a continuum, that its nature allows it to interface with matter. And when matter is formed in a biological fashion, that the mind can enter there during conception and grow together with the body and function in tandem with the body. And then when the body dies, that subtle form of the mind then goes on with whatever karma it accumulated in that lifetime to mold what it becomes. So that's the Buddhist point of view. Um, and you can kind of see it for yourself in a way. There's one contemplation you can do. You just start with the present moment and you take stock of where your mind is right now. And then you ask yourself, well, where did this current state of mind come from? And you can see if you meditate, well, it came from the previous moment. Well, where did that moment come from? Previous moment. And if you kind of unbiasedly look at the mind and you take it back step by step, where did today's mind come from? Well, it arose out of sleep and dreams. Where did those come from? Well, a lot of them came from the previous day's mind, and so forth. And you can trace that back. And you can also trace back your knowledge that way. Well, where did I learn how to speak? Well, probably from my parents, my teachers. How did I learn how to read? Well, somebody showed me what these letters were and how to sound them out. And again, you can go back from there. If you get to how your mind was as a child, you can look back at your earliest memories. And then eventually you'll get to a point where you can't remember, right? But you can safely say that whatever your first memory was, there was probably a moment of mind before that that gave rise to it. And so if you trace it back to conception, then the question a Buddhist would ask is, where did that moment of mind come from? Where did the mind start? Exactly. Scientific materialists, nobody's produced a moment of mind in a lab. Not even the most sophisticated computer systems have produced mind. And so when it comes to where did the mind come from, it's true. They go, we haven't figured that out yet. But we're absolutely sure that the mind is a material derivative, like a epiphenomena. But nobody's demonstrated that in the scientific world. The Buddhist point of view is that's because mind cannot arise out of matter. Matter does not have the capacity to know or to feel or to discern. Matter is inert. So our bodies are composed of both matter and mind. So in that moment of conception, and the Buddhist point of view is that along with the sperm and the egg of our parents, there must have been a moment of mind that came from a previous moment of mind. And that moment of mind was produced by a previous moment of mind. And it goes back that way, and you can't find a first cause for your mind. It's beginningless. It's without a beginning, which also flies in the face of both choices I mentioned before that are given to us by Western scientific materialism. Or you're a biological coincidence that will end when your body dies, or B, you're a divine being that was created by a beginningless God, right? Those are your two choices. Let's say we go door B for a second. Well, when did God start? No beginning. Well, when did humanity start? Well, in 7 days, God decided, let there be man, let there be light. Right? So there's a production story that has no real history before it, right? Or if you look at the materialist side, or the scientific materialist side, well, there was a big bang. There's this big ball of matter, and it exploded. Well, then the Buddhists would look at both of those explanations and say, well, what caused that? This God who produced everything, what produced that? What was the cause for that? Because there must have been something before that to produce it. That big ball of matter, how did that come to be? And why did it change? What were the causes that made it change and explode? And then what came before that? And so the Buddhist perspective is very comfortable with seeing that there's no beginning. And since the mind, in the Buddhist point of view, is not destructible, because matter can't destroy it because it's too subtle, that it's been there along with all the components that make up the material universe, there's been these continuums of mind. And so within that framework, every time we've taken birth as a human or an animal, we've had a mom. There's been somebody who gave us birth, who took care of us until we could take care of ourselves. And so our mother in this life, from a Buddhist point of view, has been our mother countless times. And so there's a scriptural authority for this, where the Buddha said, unimaginable bhikkhus, monks, is any beginning of this round of birth and death. I can see no being who hasn't been my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, over this long, long time. So within that framework, then the marche, the recognizing of beings as your mother, is a very profound contemplation. Because if you think of everybody in your lifetime who's been kind to you, no matter how you feel about your mom, right? Probably the person who's been the most kind has been your mom. I mean, she gave you birth. Everything you have, your body, everything came from your parents. No matter how she treated you after you were born, at least she carried you to term, right? Most likely, she did some kind of nurturing or you wouldn't have survived your infancy. Somebody fed you, somebody changed your diapers, somebody taught you how to clean yourself, taught you how to talk, how to walk. And so that marche, recognizing things have been your mother, the next contemplation is drin dren, which means remembering her kindness. And so when you start to piece it together, I remember this hit me. I was probably 18 when I started. I hadn't heard these teachings, but I started thinking of all the stuff my mom had put up with raising me. And this fabricated sense of gratitude arose, just profound gratitude for all the stuff she put up with raising me, right? And so when you contemplate, you remember the kindness, that starts to come up, not just towards your mom in this life, but towards all beings, that all of them have been like that for you many times. And so that starts the beginning of a deep sense of gratitude, very expansive sense of gratitude. And so the fourth contemplation is Drin So. Drin So means trying to repay that kindness. It's paying it forward. When you start to think of how many beings have been kind to you, even now, everything we use, our clothes, our food, our roads we drive on, our cars, our technology, countless people we never even met produce all this stuff that we need to survive. So that sense of gratitude and paying it forward opens the heart. These steps are really a way to open your heart so that you start to get in touch with your deeper sense of love and compassion. Our biology, this is interesting from a science point of view, our biology has different systems. One of the systems is called vigilance to threat. Our neurology has a negativity bias where we're always looking for danger. And that's why news stories that shock get everybody looking at them, right? Because we have this negativity bias. When our nervous system goes into the HP axis or the fight flight system, we have a hard time accessing our empathy, and we have a hard time sleeping. We get charged with adrenaline and all that kind of stuff. And so the systems in our body and mind that bring us into love and compassion. Like when you go from the fight flight stance into love and kindness and compassion, you actually produce oxytocin, the neurotransmitter or hormone in your body that gets you into more of a loving and kind of open-hearted kind of way of being. So these contemplations on Marche, all beings have been your mother, remembering their kindness, trying to pay it forward, are tapping into that innate ability that we have to be loving and trusting and open and expanding that so it's not just towards one or two people or humans, but it becomes universal. And if you ever meet a great lama, you'll just sense it when you get around them. They're open and they're very loving. Um, so anyway, that's the fourth contemplation. The fifth contemplation. Oh, by the way, those first four, that gratitude really helps pull you out of emotional poverty, where you feel like you don't have enough, or you're just always, I need more, I need more, I need more. When you get into that gratitude, it's a sense of abundance, like you're almost flowing over with all the love that you've received and the well-being that's been provided.
Question.
Yeah,
Are we still 4 of 11? Were we going over 11?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Can I just interject a
yeah,
question in
yeah,
the meantime?
yeah,
Because it's a lot to absorb.
yeah, it is.
You know, I, I just take a kind of take it on faith, rebirth, because that's easy for me to do. But I think that others have achieved the same outlook without rebirth. Like this Professor Jay Garfield, writes about these things from a Madhyamaka point of view, and he just talks about how the self is an illusion. And once we can really grasp that, either through meditation or the contemplations that you're describing, that he kind of brackets the whole issue of literal rebirth and sort of still comes to the same conclusion. So,
Yeah, the I mentioned two different traditions. One, seven cause and effect contemplation, and these first 4 points are coming out of that tradition. The other tradition that came down was called exchanging self for others, which we're about to get into. And those don't even talk about rebirth so much.
I see.
And so I think he's probably tapping into that second tradition. And they're both considered valid within a Buddhist point of view. I will say, though, um, particularly if you want to enter into Vajrayana practice, Tantrayana practice, there's really no reason to if you don't think that there's rebirth. Because because really those practices are getting into how to purify the intermediate state, death, and rebirth. And if you don't think those things are real, then why would you do it? It's kind of like,
Well, some people will want to do it because they want to be virtuous in this single lifetime. For me, the advantage of a multi-life framework is that I feel more invested. That I have sort of a spiritual genetics that I'm passing on, that I feel some stewardship and some sense of responsibility for. But there are others who just say, look, I'm not going to get into the rebirth issue. I like to have a good virtuous life here because, as you said, this thing operates not just on lifetime to lifetime, but moment to moment.
yeah.
So blah blah blah.
And I don't, in fact, my my profession is, I don't know, can you guys hear the conversation? Can you hear the questions as well as the replies? Okay, good. Um,
Yep, yep. Very well.
my profession is as a clinical social
All
worker.
right.
And so some of the things I've written are for that mindset, for a typical Westerner or educated person who doesn't believe in past and future lives. How do you tap into those higher emotions and states of mind.
See.
And so I think that that's all valid and good. Um, my reason for a little bit of caution is that really the bodhisattva ideal itself to liberate everyone from suffering, it comes down to that vision of all of us being propelled by our afflictions and karma in and out of repeated birth and death, and just this horrible, um, beginningless cycle of suffering.
Yeah.
And the sense of taking that on and trying to find a cure for it, that's really when you read the story of the Buddha, that's what sent him out of the palace. It's kind of like, you mean we're all going to die? We're all going to get sick and old age. And he had that sense of, and it happens again and again and again. Why would I want to be king? I'm going to put an end to birth and death. And so that's very much there for people who can access, I think it's a reality, people who can access that level of reality. For people who, again, we've been raised with two options, and both of them don't assert any previous continuum of being.
Yeah, but you also
So,
made the point about the interdependence, even in this life. Who grows our food? Who builds our homes? Some humanists have such a incredible sense that, I would be nothing without, you know, that are able to develop, I would say, pretty good levels of compassion.
I think so too. And I think people like that, like secular humanists who have that sense of love for everybody. I think they're kind of on the bodhisattva journey. I do. And I think they're bound for what Buddhists would call higher rebirth. But I think somewhere on their journey, inevitably, if they're going to grow, they're going to have to reconcile with how do I deal with the reality of death and what comes after,
Amen.
right?
Amen.
If it's nothing, then why worry about it?
Well, that's a sort of nihilistic perspective. Some
Right.
people are able to say, look, I'm a naturalist and I don't think there's anything afterwards, but I am morally, I believe in morality and equality and egalitarianism, and
Right.
that is enough that, to ground my actions in. But it's
And
not enough for me and for you apparently either, but
and bless their heart.
right.
Um, my my suspicion, is that at some point when they die, they're going to experience rebirth,
Oh yeah, right.
right?
They're in for a surprise, right?
But they won't remember, just be kind of like, the way we were as an infant. You have to learn the language and all that because death is very devastating. It wipes out all sorts of stuff. Um, and it's only from the Buddhist point of view, it's only the most subtle level of mind that continues, body mind. And so, and that's what Vajrayana Tantra, in fact, means continuum. And at the level of the base, it's talking about that most subtle body mind. And at the level of the path, it's like practices to wake it up and purify it and enlighten it. And at the level of result, that's what a Buddha is somebody who's been able to conquer their even most subtle afflictions and obstacles to knowledge. So it's a big path.
I'm just curious, what do your longtime students here think about this? You guys have been talking about this probably for many classes.
Anybody want to contribute to the discussion?
Well,
I think you
one
Jeff.
time I had a car accident years ago uh, in Ohio, and I mean, I find myself projected out of the body, maybe floating like 100 yards above the cars, looking down. We
Yeah,
know,
that out of body experience.
yes, we know angst. I was surprised. I was almost like curious. But I mentioned that to say that I'm totally convinced then the identification is more with the mind than with the body. So when you passing through, I guess, the mind is still completely active. Actually, when you die, they say your mind is 9 times clearer than when you are living, because when you are living, your mind is involved with the body and is getting heavy and non-perceptive, not as perceptive as when you die. So for me, I mean, I have no doubt then there is a mental life, a psychological life that you experience after death. I mean, that experience for me was good enough to show me, wow, I still have curiosity, I have emotions. It didn't stop with my body laying down there almost dead at
Well,
all.
that's what I, that's
So
what I
then
think.
I'm convinced that there is life after your physical death, and there is a separation between the mind and the body, and the mind continues on with its own adventure. So then it's very important to train the mind while we are here in the body, and to train it in a way to be virtuous and to collect the seeds and the attitude to bring you to better places in the future. Because the journey continues; it's not ending with your death.
So
That's
that's direct perception, right?
yeah, yeah.
Direct perception.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to add? I know a few people on this feed have had direct perception.
Really.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've had two out of body experiences. One is one of those, I call it death experiences because I was dead temporarily and I left my body and I saw it on the floor. And it was like material things didn't exist. I saw through walls. um, I had been in pain before I died, and the pain was gone. Um, it,
Mm.
it did. There were some stages to it. Finally, the white light. Um, um, the weirdest part is I was having an argument with something. I don't know what, that I was being told I had to go back into my body, that I wasn't finished in that body. And I was like, that's not me. I don't want to go back to it. I realized that body was a shell. Of course, once I was back in it, I'm attached to it again. um, it's like I don't want to be separated from it now that I'm back in it. But once I was out of it, I did not want to go back at all. That I knew that the shell was not me and it was a temporary vehicle. So it was a weird experience. And those experiences are things that actually, when I started hearing some of the scripture um, that's taught in Buddhism, and some of it that's taught in Hinduism as well, it was like, all right, these are the religions that fit with what I've experienced. And can help me, I don't know whether it was cope with or understand what I experienced and what I felt. Like I said, being back in the body is totally different, totally attached again. Um, but part of me is not, I'm not afraid of death so much as I'm afraid of the pain that I had to go through to get out of the body. One experience, there was no pain at all. And the other one, there was a lot of pain. So, who knows?
you have,
Um, I could talk about two experiences. One, um, when I was little, very little, I had memories of living before. And so I mean, one really bad one. I mean, I learned really young not to talk about them because when I did, being raised in a very Catholic family. Oh my God, you know. And so I remember telling my mother, "You're my mom, but you're not my mom from before." Oh my God. And, you know, and before that, I was asking her what objects were, like I pointed to the washing machine and she explained that to me. And so I just had memories and they faded over time, but I remember feelings being raised Catholic and I went to catechism and church every Sunday. I used to pray every night for God to forgive me because I believed that I lived before. You know, I thought it was a sin to think that. But I couldn't help it because I could remember. So that was one thing. And the other thing is, I've had two, not one, two, uh, very near death experiences, where I was in critical care. And um, so both of them had this where I finally, like she described, and both were painful, but I got back in my body. But one, until they fixed my problem, I actually, like, my vision got blurry. It was hard to breathe. It was like, you know, my body was betraying me, but I was still there. And you know, when that's going on, sometimes you kind of wish you would just sort of keep going and drop your body, you know, when it's that painful. And so both are really interesting experiences. And I'm just glad I found Buddhism because it just fit what I knew even when I was very little. You know, I was taught something else, but it didn't fit um, for me. So anyway, those were mine.
Wow,
Oops.
really cool.
So
Thank you for sharing.
So you can see it's probably everybody who's on here has had something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of a skewed sample, but or maybe not.
Well, who chooses to come to a classroom?
Yeah.
So me too. I had a near-death experience when I was 16. So I feel like everybody here probably has some direct experience of it. And that's why we haven't been convinced by those door A, door B arguments.
Right. So everybody here kind of feels invested in future existences. Would you say you're invested?
Yeah, the teachings are, one of the teachers of this lineage said we should be like people on a road on a long journey,
Mhm.
stopping by a city for provisions on their
Mm.
way forward.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's more the perspective.
So the project becomes developing compassion and virtue in this life with sort of like the payoff is a favorable rebirth, right?
That's the beginning level.
Okay.
There are three levels of practitioners. That's the initial scope.
Okay.
And then a bigger scope is realizing how the cycle of life is basically one of suffering and developing a wish to escape that constant rebirth cycle.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then the great scope is developing bodhicitta. And that's where we are, is that wish to free all beings
Mm-hmm.
from that.
To the point where
Yeah,
yeah, go for it, man.
I can add something. To me, I call it the process of individuation when you feel yourself and and this self is really going through the classes and studying and reflecting and many examples. It's not really substantial. It's not really foundational. You cannot really find it if you look for. So then the Buddhism is also fantastic because it's training you through bodhicitta to project yourself out of yourself and be more interested in other people, less interested, less invested in yourself, your self-image and so forth, which is the trouble, the maybe brought us here. This individuation, and how do you overcome this individuation and this basically the ignorance and think they come from the Buddhism. So for me, bodhicitta is also a way of enlarging the circle, the attachment, and hold me tight to this individual, to this sense of the self, and spend a little bit more and care a little bit more about other. Otherwise, tendentially, I feel I'm completely egotistic or completely interested in myself and nobody else. But with the training, you learn a little bit more to relax and to and to dig underneath. What is this self? What is why are we believing so much in the existence of this self with our stories and so forth? To make a long story short, I mean that's the whole work I think I need to do.
Yeah. Interesting that you
I
use
guess
the,
for
yeah.
me, one of the out of body experiences, I don't know how to explain it. Again, when something's experiential, there is no way to explain it, justify it, or anything. But the one that wasn't painful, so I wasn't focused on pain coming back into my body. I got the sense that I belonged to everything. I was part of everything. I was one with everything. And that feeling lasted for a good 20 minutes after I came back into my body. When I came back into my body, I actually had some cities. I could hear things on the other side of town. Colors were totally different. Uh, I'd had asthma all my life and couldn't smell. I could smell things, and my smell has left. It's still there. It didn't leave. I can walk out in spring and say that's a daffodil. That's a lilac. I can still smell things that I could never smell before. Before I could only smell buses and skunks. But that feeling that I was one with everything. So it wasn't just me that I had to take care of. I could read minds when I was walking down the street and you want my coat? You want my house? You want my food? It was like the fact that I belonged to everybody else and they belonged to me. I wanted to give away everything I had. Of course, once 20 minutes were up, and I was fully back to being me. I can't say I'm there again, but I remember that feeling. So the idea of true bodhicitta and the motivation to help all others came from that out of body experience and the feeling I had afterwards. Uh, Maybe I was crazy. I don't know, but
But according to
again,
the Buddha,
to
you were on target.
Right.
to find their scriptures that say that, it's like, whoa, maybe I'm not as crazy as I thought I was. Again, like was shared, I didn't share it with anyone, and I really don't. My husband doesn't know any of this. My daughter, I think, is the only person close to me I've shared some of it with because it seems too out there, but it motivates me.
But
Um,
it's right in line with what the Buddha is teaching. That's exactly, and that's the goal of the path, is to eventually get there where that's where we are, you know, all the time. So
Sharon, did you have that too? That sense of being
Yeah,
with other
I
people?
had that what she's talking about, and it lasted way more than 20 minutes. And I was just walking down the street with my friend. I was only 12 and this or 11, and she was like my best friend. I grew up with her, so we were like sisters almost. And we were quiet for once. Well, I was the quiet one, believe it or not. But anyway, I just had this, and I will call it some kind of expansive experience. And I just said, this is bigger than me. I don't. And so, because I was raised so strictly Catholic, I actually thought that maybe God was touching me. I mean, because everything lit up in gold, all the colors, and I didn't want to talk. And I just said to my friend, "Can you feel that?" And she said yes. And I don't know if she did or not, but hey, if she did, great, you know. But I never forgot that experience, and it faded. It didn't just quickly go away. It did fade. But man, would I like to be back there again? Whatever that was, it was pretty, significant. So I practice and I have glimmers of it. It's not that I don't have glimmers of it here and there, and I'm real joyful when that happens. And sometimes I feel like I almost don't deserve it because I'm not that good of a Buddhist. But anyway, um, I think you can have glimmers of it even if you don't have the big thing. But I'm really grateful I had the big whatever that was. And that was before I knew what Buddhism was. In fact, the first time that I encountered Buddhism was in sixth grade, and we were learning Eurasia. And the teacher laughed and said, "Oh, did you know there were people that believe you die and come back again?" And I was like, "Oh, other people believe that?" So that was incredulous. And I didn't feel so dumb. I thought it was great. He was laughing about it. And I'm thinking, wow, that's just so, I can't believe there's other people who believe that. So anyway, that was a humorous
There
experience
is
I
there
had.
is a movie. It's called the Sacred Mountain by Jodorowsky, right? Where there is the whole journey. These students they go through, they get trained by these masters. Eventually, they overcome the presence of the master and so forth. But before getting really to the Sacred Mountain towards the end of the movie, they meet all these people, then develop cities, and these people they have powers, but they are artists half baked. They can cross wall, like when you are probably when you are in the bardo, you can go through walls, travel whatever place, but they are stuck in the cities. And so the master is pushing the disciple to say, don't get stuck on the power on the city, because again the power is flirting with you to subtract the substance of your journey. The journey is to go beyond yourself. It's not to be enamored with your own power. So I find it very relevant because I'm also interested in Western philosophy. I read Heidegger, Friedrich Nietzsche, and so forth. And Friedrich Nietzsche talks about taking it from Schopenhauer, then essentially he's talking about the will to power. So he's saying at the end, what do we have? We have the will, the strength to become, to be somebody. But then in the Buddhism, this one is overcome too. I mean, you have to go beyond that. Otherwise, you end up like Trungpa Rinpoche was talking about, some sort of spiritual materialism where you are enamored with your own city, your own power, and so forth. The real power is to be exercising in the bodhicitta, in the helping other people. It's not being enamored with your own power. I'm saying this because it's a thing that is in me, and I have to work it out and figure it out every time. Then the spirituality goes in a direction that I feel, oh, I'm getting some good ability here. You have continually to, destructure that feeling and say, no, no,
No,
no, no.
I've had very difficult things happen that I'm not going to talk about,
Mhm.
but I had to dig very deep and be willing to experience it and also get beyond it. So I don't think that all of a spiritual journey is that wonderful thing that happened to me. I'm just grateful because I just really felt part of everything, just like Bobby said. So, I was grateful for that. I don't have it all the time. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be Buddhist. I'm just grateful that it happened. It was like a big blessing to me.
For
That's
me,
how I felt about it.
for me personally, those kinds of extraordinary experiences happened to me and they brought me back to the path. Like
Yes.
I,
Yes.
I felt like they were a sign, oh, there really is something here. And then I was telling, I think it was Bobby a few weeks ago, when I told Serme Rinpoche about my near-death experience and what I experienced, he looked at me. He was totally unimpressed. And he said, okay, good. But just follow what I'm teaching you. It's kind of bringing me back on the path. And basically the path is these two sections we're going over, relative bodhicitta, and what all of you have been talking about in the expansive part of it is the ultimate bodhicitta. And they're like two wings of a bird. If you have both of those, the relative bodhicitta and the absolute bodhicitta, then that's your,
Well, bodhicitta really helps you to, I'll just use this word, unselfish yourself, where you're not just focused on me, who I, and all that. Well, it's just a way to become interdependent with other people and all of life too, not just people, but all of life too.
Well, let me play devil's advocate and just say, even without the extraordinary, uh, isn't it for the average person, the non-Buddhist, they just love instances where they can be giving and loving and generous to someone. So it's like it's a universal reaction almost, like whether you're Buddhist or out of body or not, it's just like you're walking down the street, it feels better to smile at someone, to give someone some money, some food. Um, isn't it that simple?
well, the research is with you. Those positive states of mind are better for your heart, your health, they help lift people out of depression and anxiety. So yeah,
And
So
how
why,
much better would the world be if we were all like that? That's, I always look at it that way too. If we all smiled and we all helped others and, didn't attack and be mean and all that kind of stuff.
personally, I feel
Mhm.
like humanity is at a crisis where either humanity evolves this direction or we have an extinction event where everybody retreats into their narcissism and we self-destruct. I really think we're hovering right there.
Well, even if we self-destruct, I mean, it's not the first extinction, and actually, it there are other human-like beings on other Earth-like planets that will continue because of this beginninglessness that you've talked about, the expansiveness of the. I mean, it's sad to imagine that we're on the verge of, but it's not the end of the world from a Buddhist perspective.
As in the Vimalakirti Sutra,
Yeah.
it talks about kotis and kotis and kotis of world systems.
Oh, really?
It's like Carl Sagan back in the time of Buddha,
Oh.
billions and billions and billions of stars. So yeah, however, if you have bodhicitta, you're on the side of trying to preserve this world system and the beings.
That's
Yeah,
true.
and you feel empathy for others,
Yeah.
you actually feel, I limit my news time because I just can't. That's all there is to it. I find it, well, actually very depressing. So, and I do other things that I think that are helping people because I just feel better if I'm doing it, honestly. So, you know,
Well, it's the way of bodhisattvas, and it's a wide path, and I think everybody here is on it or drawn to it in some way. And these are kind of the core teachings on it.
Yeah, so I'm going to continue to sort of be debative and say, why do we need all these fancy techniques when it could be as simple as just acts of loving kindness and generosity? Just the four Brahma Viharas, just be nice, They asked the Dalai Lama, "What's your religion?" He said, "Loving kindness." Oh, why are we
Yeah,
in,
but at the same time, the way that we lost ourselves is a huge labyrinth. And sometimes you need specific technique. Not all the technique works at the same time. For example, through the Achok Rinpoche asked us to read certain portion of Shantideva. Stuff then in the past was working fine with me. Now he got me up in arms. I said, wait a second, this is a medieval monk, a little bit crazy, and talk about, like Wilson was talking before, about the body dissolving, getting rotten. But this is a technique to overcome the lust for the body and generating renunciation. If you don't understand the specific of the technique, like me in that instance, like a couple of weeks ago, I feel a huge reaction saying, no, 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 this is totally wrong. The body is not a rotten piece of garbage and you have to develop this gas. This is a technique, but a technique is specific for a particular difficulty that you have in certain part of your life. It is not necessarily useful all the time in your life. Sometimes it's just the opposite of what you are supposed to develop, which is, for example, in the deity yoga, a sense of the beauty of the body, not the rottenness of the body. So then I feel it's functional to the million way in which we are getting lost. There are million techniques to bring you back to, but you have to also enact a sense of a little bit of wisdom from within and say, not everything that is said out there applies to me. I'm in a certain point, maybe lower than other students, and this thing don't work for me. Other things work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's another problem, and this is what the absolute bodhicitta gets into, is that at the core, I'm going to share the screen again and share an image. If, my cursor's not working, so I won't share the
Oh,
oh, there it goes again. Let me see. It gets stuck. Got it. Okay. The Buddha did a pictograph about the cycle of existence, and he's pointing. He's outside of it, and he's pointing to the moon, which represents that liberated mind,
mhm.
and is pointing and saying, "Go there, get out of this monster,"
Mhm.
which is that cycle. And one of his teachings, if you don't clearly understand how this cycle arises and what keeps us stuck in it, you can't get free of it.
Okay.
And the primary cause, Nietzsche was talking about it, it's represented by this blind man over here. And in the hub, it's represented by the pig, which is a primordial sense of me and mine. And whenever we're stuck in that way of being, then we enter into actions which produce karma. And then that karma takes our mind in and out of different existences.
Yeah.
And so as long as we're clinging to that misunderstanding about the self, we're churning and suffering. And so that's what all the techniques are about, how to wake up so that we're not stumbling blind into suffering.
Yeah, I know, but I just I think it appeals to me, but there's a lot of good people out there from other faiths. I know I'm thinking about in history, there are bodhisattvas like Harriet Tubman, I was just reading about, an illiterate black slave, who was just totally into, you know, sacrificing herself for others, you know. I mean, she's so much more advanced, than me, and she never heard of Buddhism.
Well, there's no argument with that, except wouldn't you like Harriet Tubman to find ultimate peace and well-being?
Well, what do you mean? I mean, why should we suspect that she hasn't?
Well, you're right. Maybe she has.
I mean, if you read the writings of her, I mean, it's just like she was like, "Hey, I'm
Yeah,
good. I've suffered, but I know where I'm going,
But
and
no,
I have
but
future lives."
what that would mean is that she has the wisdom that sees through that ignorance.
She
but you
has it, but
see,
she didn't do it
you
via the
you can you
Buddha.
can learn a lot
How do
of
you know?
stories, a lot of people, but you have to stay on your own shoes. There are a lot of bodhisattva, many different type of people developing beautiful artists, but you have to stay on your own shoes and you say, what do I need now? Maybe you are not like, or I'm not at all like Harriet, whatever you say.
No,
Want to help?
I've actually met other spiritual people, not Buddhists, that had something. You could just sense it. So I believe there are other people that tap into that are not Buddhists. I wouldn't dispute that with you. And their journey is just different than mine. And good for them. Some of them, like you said, she was uneducated and she figured out a way to save people. So, good for her. We have more to navigate these days, but
There's no argument with other traditions.
no, I don't think so.
There is the sense, though, that Buddhist teachings on dependent arising and emptiness are the ultimate cure. And so anybody who has the relative bodhicitta that you're talking about, the sense in Buddhism is they're going to better destinies. They're going in a good direction.
Oh, okay. Sure.
In fact, Nagarjuna said it this way. He said, if somebody has nihilism, they're going to be ending up in worse conditions because that undercuts any sense of cause and effect or virtue.
Yeah.
If you get totally nihilistic.
Right.
If somebody has eternalism, which is that sense that there's a real self and it's eternal, that kind of sense, that thought, even though it's incorrect, is going to take them into better and better destinies.
Yeah.
For somebody who understands things exactly as they are, that will liberate them.
Oh, okay.
And so the teachings on dependent arising are to get towards that liberation so that suffering is ended.
Cool. Yeah, but I mean, I'm just wondering how to square that with the Dalai Lama, going around when people asked him, what are you trying to do? Convert the world to Buddhism? And he said, you know what? I'm not interested in converting anyone to Buddhism. In fact, I would encourage people to continue in the spiritual path that they were born into, have practiced. Buddhism is an add-on, it's an education system, it's a science, and it's completely compatible with Christianity, Judaism, Islam. It's like, wow, and I'm learning this from Robert Thurman, who's this, I think, in the same tradition as you guys, recently deceased. So when I heard that, I was like, wow, okay,
Well, that's where Buddhism is. It's not in conflict with the world, right? However, I will say that the Dalai Lama, for example, he's into harmony between religions, ecology, helping Tibetans because of their condition.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if you hear him talk about Buddha's teachings on dependent arising and emptiness, he's very precise and he's very deep. His knowledge goes very deep.
I'm sure.
And he will say that understanding that will liberate your mind.
Yeah, so maybe he was just being polite and diplomatic when he said, you be a good Christian, I don't want you to be a Buddhist,
Not at all. I don't think that's it at all. I think he sees that all traditions are valid, and so is Buddhism. And all traditions have something to contribute, right? And so if you have a faith in something, follow it, and it'll help you. The contribution that Buddha, and I've heard him say this actually, the unique contribution from Buddhism are those teachings on dependent arising.
Pretty unique.
If I can interject.
Yeah.
One thing that the Dalai Lama often adds to that when he says exactly that, and he tells an anecdote of speaking to someone else. I forget who it was. It might have been Desmond Tutu. I don't recall precisely, but what he says is that up to the teachings on emptiness. That's not Christian business. That's Buddhist business, is his quote.
Cool.
So there's a divergence there where the traditions go in different directions. They may have similar motivations to help and so on and so forth, but they're based on a completely different fundamental understanding of the way things are and the way things work.
Okay, but the question, David, is if they end up with the same effect in behavior, does it matter how divergent they are?
According to the Dalai Lama, yes, it does.
Okay.
Well, actually, he tells this very funny story of a Tibetan woman who was born Buddhist, but of course the Tibetans became refugees. And so when she was a refugee, she got taken in by Christians who helped her survive.
Oh.
And so she went to His Holiness. She said, Your Holiness, I'm so sorry, but I've been really devoted to Christianity because they've been the ones who took care of me. So in this life, I'm going to believe in Christianity. And then in my next life, I'll be Buddhism again.
That's
That was hysterical.
a good one. A good one.
So basically, you got to look at where your core is.
Yeah. But thanks, David, for mentioning, you're reminding me that he co-wrote a book with Desmond Tutu called something about joy or something like that.
Right,
So
right.
yeah.
But basically, there's no conflict. And it's as Nagarjuna said, um, like in Christianity, I've just gone through a lot of reading about Christian criticisms of Buddhism.
Oh, really?
Right? And one kind of point they go to is, God created the soul, and the soul is divine, and it is the soul that must be preserved for union with God. That's kind of the principle,
Okay.
right? And so the criticism towards Buddhism tends to be when they misinterpret the teachings on dependent arising, it's nihilistic. There
Right.
tends to be that misinterpretation. And so there's no quarrel in Buddhism. Um, the sacred would be the Buddha and the spiritual guides. And there's an attempt to, from the beginning of the path to the end, to become closer to the spiritual guides and the Buddhas, bodhisattvas, which is very much like mystical union in Christianity.
Yeah.
The sense of a soul in Buddhism would be the mental continuum.
Okay.
But where the difference is that the Buddhists would not assert that that continuum has a independent nature.
Yeah. Yeah. I really want to be me again. I want to get to do it all over again. I confess to you guys, I'm not interested in being reborn and not remembering who I was. So I but that's my ego, that's my psyche. I've been influenced by Judeo-Christian culture, psychotherapy, that this self may be an illusion, but it is a very convincing illusion. And the
Yes.
gentleman, is it Knight?
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche, you mentioned the term individuation, which is, I understand, a term of art that Carl Jung would use that term a lot. And Carl Jung said something, he said, he said he always found that his older patients, when they faced death or were fearing their aging, if they were always healthier if they had a religion, and even if it wasn't true. And he said, because the psyche, his term maybe for ego or something, is such that it thinks it's immortal, and you can't convince the psyche that there's no immortality. It just is designed to feel that way. And so I started to feel like, so what he encouraged his older patients to do in order to overcome the fear of death uh, was he said, look at death as a goal, number one. Number two, have some mythology about what's going to happen to you afterwards, even if it's bullshit, you know. it's better to hang on to something, and if you are okay with being a bird again or something like that, if in other words, he said that what's important is feeling well as you approach death. And he was concerned about patients who were like me, who were shrinking back from fear of death. And so I've just kind of let my imagination go in Joseph Campbell, all these people who are into mythology. Do you guys write them off, or do you feel like there's something interesting
There's
about mythology?
Oh, Joseph Campbell was like a god, only smaller.
Cool.
and there's no conflict with that. Our
Well,
teacher,
to me, I don't know. Jung doesn't cut it for me. He's talking about all the archetype and all the things and work on a subliminal level, right? Or Fraser, the Golden Branch, right? It's important books to read and to study, but ultimately, you're talking about fear, the fear of not being. And I find the radical thing to really understand is, you can take Jay Garfield and study, which is the very approachable Nagarjuna, no? And understanding the emptiness of the self and the emptiness of the phenomenon with the training of teachers, Dharma teachers like Wilson, like I have another couple of teachers online that are fantastic, teaching continuously about this thing. This one will release you from that fear, from that angst of wanting to be, and what if I disappear? I better hang to something, some bullshit, so then it protect my mind, and I'm not too afraid, even if it's fake. No, I don't want to fake myself that way. I want to really understand. Does it make sense what Nagarjuna is teaching? And for me, I have example in my life where I really saw that mouse, that will of being, that identification. Then I continually grasping on, try to protect myself and say, oh, this one is me, I will carry on. But there is no such thing like that. You better try to understand Nagarjuna, study the text, get training. I don't know.
so
But
one of
also, the thing about Jung was he he was immersed in science. That was his job. But
Okay.
that wasn't all that he did. He really looked at a lot of other things like occult and that's where he broke away from Freud. So he experimented with many systems. And so that's not a real well-known fact about him, but he wasn't happy just being a psychiatrist. That was not all that he did. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
can I make 2 points? One is that our teacher, Nietzsche, and I can't remember if David, if you met him, Sarah Rinpoche,
Yeah, can Rinpoche, yes.
he
Oh,
was asked by a head of a hospital about how to help patients who are dying. And his advice was whatever their religion is, support that. Do not try to teach them a new religion right when they're about to die, because the main thing, of course, is fear.
Okay.
And so that's fine, and that's healthy. What Nietzsche is talking about, that ultimate view, a lot of the higher practices in Buddhism are trying to acclimate us to that real nature
I see.
so that it's not so scary. And one big part of this text that we'll get into is how to handle death and dying
Hmm.
and how to promote the mind during death, because that's such a crucial.
Yeah. How about you, Bobby? Scared to die?
No, it said I'm I'm just afraid of suffering when I die. But
She's
death,
done that
again,
already.
I can't say that I know what's going to happen. And there are some Buddhist scriptures that help you prepare for the process of actually dying and seeing what's happening when you're dying. And the transition. Again, since I don't remember that kind of specifics from past lives, I can't say that any of it's real or true. But like was said in other things, it's going to help me cope with the process. And one of the things that I've seen, not just in Buddhism, but in a lot of religions, because I came from a hospital background and worked on a lot of the floors with the people that were dying, that nobody cared about them dying, is that some died and their mind caused more suffering and pain, and others, because of faith, hope, or whatever it was, that spiritual practice that they had, they were happy with their life. They were happy with what they'd done. And again, I think you had said it yourself. Death was just another transition that was part of life, just like birth. So, yeah, it's not unique to Buddhism to be able to have that hope or faith. I've seen it in a lot of others. It's just that I'm a weird person where I had to have the experiences I had. I had prayed and meditated for him. I'm doubting Thomas. I was raised Christian. I have to stick my hand in the hole before I'm going to believe it. I have to see for myself. I cannot believe what other people say unless I experience it. So the experiences I've had are what drew me to Buddhism, versus sent me away from some other religions. And some of the things that I haven't experienced, there's enough in the Buddhist scriptures where others have shared their experiences, so to speak, that it just, I don't know, I'm prepared by, when you were talking about, well, why can't you just be loving and kind? Well, shoot, man, when somebody comes up and punches me in the face, I'm not going to be loving and kind to them. When somebody says nasty things about me, I have a real hard time being loving and kind to them. And the scriptures in Buddhism give me ways that I can train myself to be loving and kindness, to develop that compassion that I want to have, but that I don't have. So, right now, as I've shared with some other people, Buddhism helps me live better day to day. And again, I call myself Bad Bobby because I am definitely nowhere near where I need to be. But thank God for the Dharma that I can put myself back on, as was said, I can put myself right back on the path when I find myself I'm not there.
It offers a path.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh, one more, David.
David, you're lighting up. Yeah.
Did you
No,
want to
I
say
got
something?
nothing.
You got nothing? See, he's got everything.
After you told us that Joseph Campbell was God, I mean, say more about that.
That's the Sky Rizzi quote.
Oh,
Nothing
his
is
Power
everything.
Myth series with Bill Moyers had a profound effect on my life. That was great stuff. His mind was so sharp. What I was thinking was the way in which it matters, whether or not it matters if you're a good person or not in this life, or what being a good person is based on, which set of tenets or beliefs you use that drives you to be there, or whether you're just naturally that good and kind, is whether or not you grasp samsara and escape from it. That's really the primary difference. The fundamental understanding of reality and the release from the continuous cycle. So in other religions, someone could be just as kind and so on, but they're not going to achieve that release from samsara. They're not seeking it, and they may just be looking for that eternal reward or fearing that eternal punishment, as the case may be.
Right.
Yeah, I've actually heard Christians say that, suffering places you closer to God. And I'm like, oh my God, so not what I
Sure,
believe.
there's
Okay.
asceticism within Christianity,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah. No, there lot, yeah. It
as well.
yes. So
Like, the way I see it is that it's that first level practitioner wanting a better afterlife. And so I think it does work, probably. But when you get to that point where you want freedom from that cycle of existence,
Mhm.
well, you gotta you gotta identify the part of the mind that's stuck in false belief
Yeah, but
about
none of you have hinted, and I
And
guess this
how
will
it's
pick this
stuck.
up another time. None of you have hinted about when you escape samsara, then what? What does that look like? Is this place where you go and you're permanently anesthetized,
no.
where you don't have to come? I mean, what else do you? How can you, a person who only has experienced a human existence, even imagine something other than a human existence?
Um, basically, it, I know it's time to stop. But I really appreciate you getting the conversation started. Basically, it's um, once the causes of suffering are extinguished, your continuum goes on, but it doesn't suffer and it's not fooled.
Oh, okay.
And basically, Buddhists have description of heavens where enlightened beings hang out and party on, and
Yeah.
All
I
right.
asked,
basically try to help beings
I
wish
asked Katsu Rinpoche
Okay.
the past week. I mean, Rinpoche, all this teaching that you're doing and so forth, but I'm still confused. Where are we? What are we aiming here? Are we trying to stop the samsara, the cycle, the coming continually back, unaware, in somehow? What are we doing? And they said, well, as simple as we are trying to be enlightened for the benefit of the beings. So now you are not enlightened yet, but in this life you work, you get some sort of liberation from major affliction by following, the 10 virtues, deed, and so forth, slowly, slowly, because like Sharon, I think, said, I do a lot of mistakes too, and a lot of stuff that needs to be redone and purified. But essentially, we are moving towards enlightenment. Maybe in this lifetime, maybe in the next 10 lifetime. But the process, the direction is that one. So to become enlightened for what? For the benefit of the beings, not for yourself, because the self we already verified it doesn't really exist. It's just a big fat delusion that is the root of all your suffering. That self that we are trying to protect. And you have eventually existentially to realize that. Otherwise, you are always stuck into protecting something that is really your own inner enemy. But we are going towards enlightenment at a small pace, maybe, but that's what Rinpoche said. I don't know.
And who's to say that enlightenment is not the same as mystical union? Well, I'll tell you when I get there, if I get there,
It's
or maybe
very
you'll tell me.
open-minded of, you know.
I wanted to say I appreciate all your questions. I don't think you asked any questions that I haven't already asked. And that sometimes I get stuck on. So they're good questions, and that's the other thing I like about Buddhism. It encourages that kind of thinking. Um, they don't want you to just sit back. The scriptures don't want you to just sit back and shove the dogma in. They
Yeah,
want you to ask those questions about the scriptures. So that
that's
I also found,
that's considered
as a
part of
scientist, I found it very good for me to be able to ask those kind of questions.
it's considered part of the perfection of wisdom is to
Yeah.
ask those really penetrating questions that you think will stump your teachers or others. My teacher used to say, "Go ahead, make my day." And somebody would start to remember. He used to imitate Clint. All right, you guys. Always good to see you all. I'm going to just do the closing prayers and then Gewadi, Geokon, Sunami Eshe, Soto Shin, Sunami Eshe, Lejum, Weh, Damba Kunye, Tobasho. Janju Sanjo Rinpoche, Amage Bana Gegerje, Geba Nyamba Meba Yang, Gone Gondo Bawa Sho. Gari Rawe Koe, Shingande, Abendande, Omalu, Juene, Generous, Iwan Tenzin, Gatso Ye, Shebe Side, Badu, Tengyo, Cheap, accustomed to dedicate the merit towards enlightenment. And so, we're not going to have this class for a while because Gyume Khensen Rinpoche is coming here in 2 weeks, and he's going to spend the weekend with Art translating, teaching Tsongkhapa's narrative of realizations. And then he'll be teaching at GC the next weekend. Then he'll be up at DNKL the next 2 weekends. So the next time we'll do this class will probably be mid-September. You guys okay?
Yep.
All right. Always good
Yeah.
seeing you all. Stay
Be well.
healthy.
A
Be
quick
well.
correction is nagging at my brain. Quick correction. I did not meet Sirma Khenchen Rinpoche.
Oh, you didn't?
I
Well,
didn't.
you have through his students.
Indeed.
And you've met a lot of other really
I met you just before he passed.
well, he was something. Can I tell you one story before we sign up? Somebody actually came by this week who had been a student and had met him. And she had always struggled with, do I just sit or do I get into study? Because study is so complicated, and maybe I should just sit. And so she and several other students went up to meet him. I didn't tell him a thing about anybody I was introducing him to, but all of the new students went up into his room, and he went around one by one and he hit them with their very core issue. When he came to her, he said, I didn't tell him. He said, sitting like a rabbit won't help you. You need to study.
Remember
And
that.
so she came back to tell me this, and she had thought I had told him about her dilemma, and I hadn't. But she said it transformed her life. Just that one interaction completely
I
transformed.
actually remember that line from you telling this story before. Yeah.
And
Not
they
sitting
have
like a rabbit.
clairvoyance. They have
Well,
this
anyways,
kind of clairvoyance. They read your thoughts, so be careful what you are thinking because they can read everything.
it's really lucky to have met a great teacher like that, and to meet several is beyond luck. Anyway, take care, everybody.
I
Enjoy.
will. Be
Thank you.
well.